The Mafia Boss was stepping out of his restaurant when something small tugged at his sleeve. Not a gun, not a knife, a crumpled $5 bill. He looked down. A little girl stood on the cracked sidewalk, pink t-shirt stained with tears, ponytail messy, both hands shaking as she held the money up like it was her whole world. "Please," she whispered, "this is all I have." His men surged forward, too close, too fast, but Carlo Rossi raised one hand. They froze. No one paid him in $5 bills. People paid him in fear. He crouched down, black suit jacket open, gold chain gleaming against the tattoos snaking across his chest, until he was eye level with her. "What do you want, kid?" She swallowed hard, voice trembling. "I want you to help me. Because the police won't." That made him pause. She leaned closer, barely above a whisper. They said if I told anyone, my mom wouldn't come home." That's when he saw it. Bruised knuckles, torn sleeve, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder like the monsters were still watching. Something inside the most feared man in the West End cracked. He slowly took the $5, not because he needed it, but because whatever she was about to ask was worth far more than money. "Stay with me until the end." Because what this little girl asked next filled even Carlo Rossi's eyes with tears. If stories like this move you, real emotion, real courage, real redemption, hit that like button right now, subscribe so you never miss one, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from today? Let's see how far this story reaches. Carlo the Shadow Rossi had ruled the West End for 16 years, and he built his empire on two things: keeping his word and making problems disappear forever. His territory stretched from the old docks to the downtown warehouses. Everyone knew the rules. You paid on time, you stayed quiet, and you never, ever touched families. That Tuesday evening started like any other, until a 7-year-old girl in a pink t-shirt forced the most dangerous man alive to remember the scared 10-year-old boy he once was. Carlo Rossi pushed through the heavy oak door of Il Sole's private back office, the same door that had closed behind 1,000 deals sealed in blood and cash. The room smelled of old leather, cigar smoke, and the faint copper tang that never quite left no matter how many times the rugs were replaced. He didn't bother with the lights. Moonlight sliced through the half-closed blinds, them painting silver bars across the desk. He dropped into the high-backed chair and laid the crumpled $5 bill flat under the single desk lamp. The bill looked absurd there, small, worn, innocent, next to the matte black Beretta and the stack of ledgers that tracked millions. Carlo stared at it until his vision blurred again. He hadn't cried in 35 years, not since the night the hospital lights flickered out and the machines went quiet around his mother's bed. 10 years old, standing in the hallway in hand-me-down shoes 2 sizes too big, listening to a doctor explain that there was nothing more they could do. Nothing they could do because there was no money. No money because his father had walked out when Carlo was 6. No money because the world didn't care about boys like him. Because that was the night Carlo learned the first real rule of survival. Weakness kills faster than bullets. He'd clawed his way up from there, sleeping in abandoned cars near the docks, running errands for low-level bookies, lifting wallets until he was fast enough to take what he needed without asking. At 14, he made his first kill, a dealer who thought a kid was easy prey. 1 knife, 1 clean thrust, and the docks belonged to him for the night. By 18, he had a crew. By 25, he had the West End. By 30, he had the name The Shadow, because problems disappeared when he walked past. 16 years later, the territory stretched from rusted container cranes to glass-fronted downtown towers, and every player in the city knew 3 things about Carlo Rossi: pay on time, stay quiet, never touch families. And the third rule was the one he enforced most brutally. Not out of sentiment. He'd long ago convinced himself sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford, but because families meant children, and children meant witnesses, heat, headlines, and eventually federal attention. One crying kid on the news could unravel decades of careful silence. So when rival crews crossed that line, Carlo didn't negotiate. He erased them. Whole families vanish sometimes, not because he enjoyed it, but because the message had to be absolute. Touch what's innocent in my territory and nothing innocent remains. He rubbed his thumb over Abraham Lincoln's face on the $5 bill. The paper was soft from being folded and refolded, the way a child clings to something precious. Luna's small hands had done that. Her pink t-shirt, her messy ponytail, her bruised knuckles. She'd stood on cracked concrete and looked straight into the eyes of the man most people crossed the street to avoid. A soft knock. The door opened before he answered. Marco stepped in first, broad shoulders filling the frame, followed by Nico, leaner, sharper, always calculating odds. They'd been with him since the early days. They knew better than to speak until spoken to. "Boss," Marco started, voice low, "we got 40 guys ready to roll, but this ain't our fight. A kid shows up with $5 and suddenly we're going to war over a nobody widow? The Volkovs are scum, sure, but they're contained. We hit them hard. We paint a target on our back for every crew watching." Nico nodded. "He's right. We've spent years keeping the peace. One move like this and the commission starts asking questions. Oh, we lose control of the narrative. We lose everything." Carlo didn't look up from the bill. "They've been testing us for months. Small shipments through the South Docks, skimming protection from 2 of our corner stores, moving girls through the old mill district. I let it slide because it was small, because I thought they knew the line." He finally lifted his gaze. The lamplight caught the wet sheen still clinging to his lower lids. "They crossed it when they took a mother from her 7-year-old daughter 3 blocks from my restaurant." Marco shifted. "Boss?" "I almost sent her away," Carlo said quietly. I stood there on the sidewalk, ready to tell Marco to put her in a cab, send her to child services, wash my hands of it. That's what the rules say. No kids, no emotions, no exceptions. He picked up the bill, folded it once. Was the way Luna must have done 100 times while she waited alone in a dark apartment. Then I looked at her eyes. Same eyes I saw in the mirror when I was 10. Same eyes that watched a mother die because the world didn't have room for people without power. She wasn't begging. She was hiring me, with everything she had. Silence stretched. Marco and Nico exchanged a glance. Carlo stood. The Volkovs don't just get a warning tonight. They get a lesson, one they won't walk away from. He reached for the burner phone on the desk, thumbed a single number. It rang once. "Round up every soldier," Carlo said, voice steady now, cold steel under silk. "Tonight the Volkovs learn what real fear is." He ended the call and slipped the $5 bill into his breast pocket, close to his heart. Then he walked out to make the city remember why they called him the Shadow. Luna Perez pressed her back against the closet door and tried to make herself smaller than she already was. The bedroom smelled like Mama's lavender soap and the spaghetti sauce still simmering on the stove. 3 nights ago, that smell had meant home. Now it meant danger. The knocking started loud, 3 hard bangs that rattled the thin walls. Mama froze at the kitchen counter, wooden spoon dripping red. She tiptoed to the peephole, then jerked back like she'd been burned. "Luna, closet. Now, quiet." Luna didn't argue. She ran on sock feet, slipped inside, pulled the door almost shut, leaving a crack just wide enough to see. Mama opened the front door a sliver, chain still on. 2 men filled the frame. One tall with a shaved head and a snake tattoo curling up his neck. The other shorter, gold teeth flashing when he grinned. "Gabriela Perez?" the tall one asked, voice flat. Mama's hand shook on the door. "Who are you?" "Your husband owed us $20,000. He's gone. You pay." "We don't have it," Mama said. "He died last year. Car accident. We have nothing." The short one laughed, a wet sound. "Then you work it off. Special work. Or we take the kid instead." Luna's stomach dropped. She pressed her palm over her mouth so she wouldn't cry out. Mama tried to close the door. The tall one shoved it open, snapping the chain. Mama screamed once, sharp, desperate, before the short one clamped a hand over her mouth. They dragged her toward the hallway. Mama kicked, clawed, eyes wild. She looked straight at the closet crack and mouthed one word: hide. Luna bit her lip until she tasted blood. The men hauled Mama outside. A black van idled at the curb, back doors open like a mouth. They threw Mama inside. The doors slammed. Tires squealed. Then silence. Luna stayed in the closet until the streetlights came on. When she finally crept out, the apartment felt too big. The spaghetti had boiled dry on the stove, smoke curling from the pot. She turned off the burner with shaking hands. For 3 nights, she lived like a ghost in her own home. She locked every door and window. No phone. Mama's was in her purse, gone with her. Luna ate peanut butter straight from the jar with a spoon, then crackers when the jar got low. She rationed them, counting squares like money. At night, headlights swept past the window, and she dove under the kitchen table, heart hammering, certain the black van had come back for her. She cried until there were no tears left, then practiced being brave. She whispered to the dark, "Mama's coming home. She promised." But the apartment stayed quiet, except for the refrigerator hum and her own breathing. On the 3rd evening, stomach growling and courage thinning, Luna remembered Mrs. Mendoza. The old woman at the corner market always slipped her an extra apple when Mama was short on change. Luna waited until full dark, pulled on her pink t-shirt, the only clean one left, and slipped out the back stairwell. The street felt endless. Every shadow moved. She kept her head down, small steps fast, knee clutching the $5 bill she'd found in Mama's coat pocket, her lunch money for the week she'd never spent. Mrs. Mendoza's store bell jingled. The old woman looked up from the register, eyes widening. "Luna, mija, what are you doing out alone?" Luna's voice cracked. "They took Mama 3 days ago. I don't know what to do." Mrs. Mendoza hurried around the counter, locked the door, pulled Luna into the back room. She sat her on a stool, gave her a warm soda. "Tell me everything." Luna did. When she finished, Mrs. Mendoza crossed herself. "The Volkovs," she whispered. "Bad men. But there's one man they fear. Carlo Rossi. They call him the Shadow. He runs the West End. If anyone can bring your mama back, it's him." Luna's eyes went wide. "Where is he?" "Il Sole Ristorante, 3 blocks down." "I'm but child." "I have to try." Luna pulled out the $5 bill. "This is all I have. I'll hire him." Mrs. Mendoza's face softened. "You're braver than most grown men, mija. Go, but be quick. I'll keep the light on." Luna walked the 3 blocks rehearsing. "Please help me. This is all I have. Bring my mama home." Over and over, like a prayer. Meanwhile, across town in Il Sole's back office, Carlo's burner buzzed. Marco's voice crackled through. "Confirmed. Volkov warehouse, riverfront, old container yard. Guards, black vans, lights in 3 units. Intel says they're holding at least 6 women. Trafficking confirmed. Your call, boss." Carlo folded the $5 bill one more time and slipped it into his pocket. "We move tonight." He stepped outside. The convoy was already forming, black SUVs, engines low and hungry. At 3 blocks away, Luna reached Il Sole just as the last of the daylight bled from the sky. She saw the big black car, the 2 men at the door. She took a deep breath, straightened her pink t-shirt, and walked straight toward the most dangerous man in the West End. Behind her, Mrs. Mendoza watched from the market doorway until the little girl disappeared inside the restaurant's glow. Then she locked up and prayed. The back room of Il Sole smelled of gun oil, espresso, and the faint char of yesterday's cigars. 40 men filled the long table, hard faces carved from years on the street, ex-military scars, prison ink, eyes that had seen too much and said too little. They sat in silence as Carlo Rossi walked in last, black coat still on, the crumpled $5 bill a quiet weight in his breast pocket. Ye maps of the riverfront warehouse district covered the table like battle plans from another war. Satellite prints showed the container yard, rows of rusted steel boxes, 2 narrow entry roads, chain-link perimeter. Photos were pinned beside them, grainy shots of black vans, armed guards smoking under floodlights. And one smaller picture printed from a burner phone. Gabriela Perez, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, smiling in what looked like a park. Her eyes were kind. They weren't kind now. In the surveillance still Marco had pulled from a hacked camera feed, tied to a folding chair inside Container 7, head lolling, drugged. Carlo stood at the head of the table. No one spoke until he did. "Listen," he said, voice low but carrying to every corner. "The Volkov brothers have been bleeding into our territory for months. Small cuts. We let them because they stayed small. Tonight they stopped being small." He tapped the photo of Gabriela. 3 days ago, they took this woman from her apartment, left her 7-year-old daughter alone with peanut butter and crackers. The girl walked into my restaurant tonight and offered me this. He pulled the $5 bill from his pocket and laid it flat on the table. The room went stiller than it already was. To bring her mother home? His voice cracked on the last word, just enough for the men closest to notice. A few shifted in their seats. Carlo Rossi didn't crack. Not in front of them. Not ever. He straightened. This isn't about the money she owed. It's not even about the 20 grand they claim her dead husband left behind. It's about them thinking they can operate in the West End. I'd take a mother off the street 3 blocks from where I eat and walk away breathing. He leaned forward, palms flat on the maps. We go in quiet. 3 teams. Sal, you take north entrance. 8 men, suppressors, knives first. Marco, south side. 6 men, same rules. Nico and I hit the front with the rest. Silent until we're not. Hostages get non-lethal. Zip ties, gags, out alive. Anyone who laid hands on Gabriela Perez, anyone who even looked at her wrong, doesn't walk out. A younger soldier near the back cleared his throat. Boss, intel says there's more than 1 woman in there. Carlo nodded once. 6 confirmed, maybe more. They're running a pipeline. Girls moved through the containers, shipped out when the price is right. Volkovs were using our blind spots to build it. Tonight we end the pipeline. He let that settle. And the men around the table exchanged looks, not fear, but recognition. This wasn't collections or a territory spat. This was something older, something that reminded them why some of them had followed Carlo when no one else would. He picked up the $5 bill again, folded it once, then again, the way he'd seen Luna do it on the sidewalk. Small, careful, like it might break. For a moment, the room faded. He saw her pink t-shirt, her tear-streaked face, the way she'd pushed the bill into his hand like it could buy miracles. His thumb traced Lincoln's profile. Then he slipped it back into his pocket. "Questions?" he asked. Silence. "Good." He straightened his coat. "Vehicles staged in the alley. We roll in 20. Full blackout. No phones, no chatter outside the comms. There were ghosts until the Volkovs realized they're already dead." He turned toward the door, paused, looked back at the 40 men who had become more than employees over the years. They were his brothers in the only family he'd ever really had. "Tonight we don't collect protection money," Carlo said quietly. "Tonight we collect justice." The room answered with the scrape of chairs and the metallic snap of magazines being checked. Carlo stepped into the hallway, the weight of the $5 bill steady against his heart, and walked toward the night that would change everything. The convoy rolled out of the alley behind Il Sole like a shadow detaching from the wall. 3 black SUVs, windows tinted to obsidian, no plates that would survive the night. Carlo rode shotgun in the lead vehicle, Nico driving, but the engine a low growl that matched the pulse in his ears. Radio silence held, except for the occasional click of a channel check, 3 short bursts to confirm everyone was breathing. The West End slipped past in fragments, shuttered storefronts, sodium streetlights buzzing overhead, the occasional late-night walker who froze at the sight of the dark procession and then vanished into doorways. Carlo kept his eyes forward, hands resting loose on his thighs, the $5 bill still folded against his chest like a talisman. He hadn't spoken since the War Council. There was nothing left to say. They took the long way, side streets, industrial back roads, avoiding the few cameras the city bothered to maintain. The river smell hit first, diesel, brackish water, rotting pilings. And then the warehouse district rose around them, acres of stacked shipping containers, rusted cranes frozen mid-reach, floodlights throwing harsh yellow pools across cracked asphalt. Nico eased the lead SUV to a stop 2 blocks out, engine off. The other 2 vehicles ghosted into position behind, doors opening in near-perfect sync. Men spilled out, black tactical gear, suppressed rifles slung low, faces painted dark. No chatter. They knew the drill. Carlo stepped onto the pavement, the night air cold against his skin. Through binoculars, he scanned the yard. 3 containers lit from inside, weak yellow spilling through seams. 2 black vans parked nose in near the center. Guards moved in lazy loops. 4 visible, cigarettes glowing, rifles slung carelessly over shoulders. Sloppy, comfortable, they thought the West End still slept. When he lowered the binoculars, guilt coiled in his gut, sharp and familiar. He should have seen it sooner. The Volkovs hadn't crept in overnight. They'd been probing for months, small loads through the South Docks, quiet shakedowns on the edges of his turf. He'd let it slide because it was small, because he was tired of blood for blood's sake. Now a mother sat drugged in a metal box because he'd looked the other way. He thought of his own mother then, not the hospital room, but earlier. Nights she'd worked double shifts at the diner, coming home with blistered feet and a forced smile, telling him everything would be fine. He'd believed her until he didn't, until the bill came and the lights went out. He'd sworn then that no one under his watch would ever be that helpless again. And yet here he was, fixing a mistake he should never have allowed. Sal's voice whispered through the earpiece, calm as stone. "North team in place. 2 guards, elevated walkway. Ready on your mark." Marco followed. "South secure. 3 tangos, ground level suppressed." Nico glanced at Carlo. "We're set, boss." Carlo nodded once. The teams melted into the darkness, shadows among shadows, moving low and fast toward their sectors. He watched the first knife work. A guard near the north fence turned at the wrong second, throat opened before he could gasp. The body lowered silently to the gravel. Another guard farther down caught a suppressed round behind the ear. Soft pop, slump, gone. Carlo moved with Nico's group toward the front gate. The chain link rattled faintly as bolt cutters bit through. They slipped inside, boots silent on concrete. A guard rounded a container corner. Carlo closed the distance in 3 steps, arm around the throat, knife sliding up under the ribs. The man stiffened, sagged. Carlo lowered him behind a stack of pallets, wiped the blade on the dead man's jacket. The yard went quiet except for the river lapping against the docks and the distant hum of a generator. Every guard visible was down. The lit containers waited like iron tombs. Carlo pressed the comms button. His voice was flat, final. "Go!" He stepped forward into the deepest shadows, the weight of the night pressing against his shoulders, the $5 bill warm against his heart. The breach had begun. The signal hung in the air for half a heartbeat. "Go!" Then the night exploded into controlled violence. 3 teams struck at once. On north side, Sal's men breached the chain link with muffled cutters, poured through like smoke, suppressed rifles sweeping low arcs. South, Marco's squad hit the service gate, flashbangs rolling ahead, 2 guards dropping before they could raise their weapons. Carlo and Nico took the front, straight through the main roll-up door that someone had left cracked for ventilation. Carlo kicked it wide. The metal shrieked once, then the team flooded inside. Container 7 was first. Carlo moved point, Beretta raised, Nico tight on his right. The interior lights buzzed sickly yellow. Stacks of crates blocked sight lines, perfect ambush spots. A Volkov thug spun from behind a pallet, AK coming up. Carlo fired twice, center mass, suppressed coughs, man down. Nico cleared the left flank, another body slumped. Clear, Nico whispered. They pushed deeper. A narrow corridor of chained shipping doors led to smaller partitions. Carlo signaled halt. Muffled sobs leaked through the steel. He nodded to Nico. They breached the next door together. 5 women huddled against the far wall, chained at the ankles, filthy blankets, eyes wide with terror and exhaustion. One, barely 20, lifted her head. Bruises bloomed across her cheekbones. Another clutched a torn shawl like armor. Carlo lowered his weapon. "We're getting you out. Stay quiet." The women stared, disbelieving. One whispered, "Police?" Carlo shook his head once. "Better." Nico cut the chains with bolt cutters from his pack. The women moved slowly, legs numb, but they moved. 2 of Sal's men appeared at the rear door, guiding them toward the exit. "Medical staging outside," Sal's voice crackled in Carlo's ear. They're safe." Carlo didn't linger. He pushed forward, heart steady but tight. Container 7 opened into a makeshift hallway of linked units. More doors, more locks, more silence that felt wrong. Marco's team reported in. "Container 12, 4 more women, bad shape. Moving them now." Carlo's jaw clenched. The pipeline had been bigger than the intel suggested. He stepped into the next unit, Nico covering. Container 7 proper, a single folding chair bolted to the floor. Gabriela Perez sat slumped against the ropes, head lolling, dark hair matted with sweat. A drip bag hung from a hook above her, sedative probably. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Carlo crossed the space in 3 strides, knelt, cut the ropes with his knife. She stirred at the touch, eyelids fluttering. "Gabriela," he said softly, I'm here for Luna." Her eyes focused, slow, foggy. Recognition flickered. "My daughter. Luna." The words came out cracked, barely audible, but they hit Carlo like a fist. "I've got you," he said. He slid one arm under her knees, the other behind her shoulders, lifted her carefully. She was light, too light. Her head rested against his chest. "You're going home?" Gabriela's fingers curled weakly into his coat. "She's alone." Not anymore. Carlo carried her toward the exit, Nico sweeping ahead. Outside, the yard had become a triage zone, his men moving the rescued women to waiting vans, med kits open, quiet voices giving instructions. Flashlights cut sharp beams through the dark. No alarms, no sirens. The Volkovs had built their prison too far from help. Carlo set Gabriela gently on a stretcher in the lead SUV. One of Sal's medics checked her vitals, started an IV. She reached for Carlo's hand, squeezed once, grateful, exhausted, before her eyes closed again. He stepped back, wiped sweat from his brow. The yard was almost secure. Bodies cleared, containers swept. Then Marco's voice cut through the comms, low and urgent. "Boss, Container 15, lights on, 2 men inside, counting cash. It's the Volkov brothers." Carlo's gaze snapped toward the far end of the yard. A single container stood apart, floodlights spilling from the open door. Shadows moved inside, 2 figures, heads bent over stacks of bills. He checked his watch. 11:42. Luna was still waiting at Mrs. Mendoza's, counting minutes. Carlo drew his Beretta, thumbed the safety off. "Hold position," he told the teams. "I'm going in." He started walking, slow, deliberate, toward the last container, the night closing around him like a fist. The Volkovs hadn't heard the end coming. Yet. Carlo stepped through the open door of Container 15 alone. The interior was lit by a single hanging bulb swinging gently, casting long shadows across stacks of cash, laptops, and a folding table cluttered with burner phones. The air smelled of stale cigarettes, printer ink, and fear that had soaked into the steel walls. Dmitry Volkov, older, broader, snake tattoo curling up his neck, sat counting bundles of hundreds. Alexei, younger and leaner, gold teeth glinting, tapped at a laptop screen. Both men froze when Carlo's shadow fell across the threshold. Dmitry's hand drifted toward the pistol on the table. Alexei's eyes flicked to the door behind Carlo, calculating escape routes that no longer existed. Carlo Rossi," Dmitry said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't expect a personal visit. Come to negotiate?" Carlo didn't answer. He let the silence stretch until it hurt. Alexei tried next. "Business is business, yeah? We didn't know the woman was connected to you. Small misunderstanding. We can split the take. 60-40 your favor. Everyone walks away happy." Carlo's voice came out low, almost conversational. "You took a mother from her 7-year-old daughter. Left the girl alone for 3 days with peanut butter and crackers. Tonight that girl walked up to me on the sidewalk outside my restaurant and offered me this." He pulled the crumpled $5 bill from his breast pocket and held it between 2 fingers. The bulb light caught the worn edges. $5. Everything she had in the world. She hired me to bring her mama home. Dmitry's smile faded. Alexei's hand twitched toward his gun. Carlo continued, voice steady as stone. "You laughed while you dragged Gabriella away. You drugged her. You photographed her tied to a chair and sent the picture to scare me into paying ransom. You threatened a child. That wasn't business. That was suicide." Dmitry lunged first, snatching for the pistol. Carlo moved faster. He closed the distance in 2 strides, caught Dmitry's wrist, twisted hard. Bone cracked. The gun clattered to the floor. Dmitry swung a wild fist. Carlo drove an elbow into his throat, dropping him to his knees, gasping. Alexei went for the laptop, probably to wipe files. Carlo kicked the chair out from under him. Alexei hit the ground hard. He scrambled for a knife in his boot. Carlo stomped on his hand, fingers crunched. Alexei screamed once, short, raw, before Carlo's knee pressed into his chest, pinning him. 90 seconds. That was all it took. Carlo drew his Beretta. One suppressed shot to Dmitry's forehead, center mass follow-up. Dmitry slumped sideways, eyes vacant. Alexei stared up, gold teeth bared in terror. "You animals," Carlo said quietly, "don't get to walk away." 2 more shots. The container went silent except for the faint drip of blood on steel. Carlo exhaled once, long and slow. He stepped over the bodies to the table. The laptop screen still glowed. Spreadsheets, photos, shipping manifests. A ledger, digital and paper, detailed the pipeline. Names, ages, prices. Gabriella listed at 20,000. Destination marked overseas. Buyer confirmed. 6 other women already sold forward. Dozens more in the pipeline over the last 8 months. Carlo's stomach turned. He snapped photos with his burner, then smashed the laptop under his heel. The paper ledger he folded and tucked inside his coat. Outside, Marco's voice crackled through the comms. "All hostages accounted for and en route to safe houses. Medicals on scene, yards clean. Volkov operations done, boss. Permanently." Carlo acknowledged with a single click. He turned back to the bodies, then noticed a small stack of Polaroids on the table. Insurance, probably. One caught his eye. Luna Perez, taken from outside her apartment window. Pink t-shirt, messy ponytail, looking straight at the camera with those wide, trusting eyes. His hands began to shake, not from adrenaline, not from the fight, from the sudden, crushing weight of what almost happened. Oh, what would have happened if Luna hadn't found the courage to walk 3 blocks and tap a stranger's sleeve? The tremble started in his fingers, traveled up his arms. He clenched his fists until the shaking stopped, then slipped the photo of Luna into the same pocket as the $5 bill. He walked out of Container 15 without looking back. The yard was empty now except for his men sweeping the last traces away. Carlo climbed into the lead SUV. Gabriella waited in the back, blanket around her shoulders, eyes clearer now. "She's safe," Carlo told her. "Luna's waiting." Gabriella reached out, touched his arm. "Thank you." Carlo nodded once. "Tell her the job's done." The convoy pulled away from the river, leaving nothing behind but ghosts and silence. The convoy ghosted back into the West End just before midnight. No sirens trailed them, no lights flashed. Only the low hum of engines and the quiet breathing of exhausted women in the back seats. Carlo rode in the lead SUV with Gabriella beside him, blanket-wrapped, 4th line taped to her arm, eyes clearer now but still distant, like part of her was still locked in that container. Mrs. Mendoza's market came into view first, single bulb burning above the door, closed sign crooked in the window. A small silhouette sat on the stool behind the counter, knees drawn up, staring at the street. Luna. Carlo pulled to the curb. The other vehicles idled a block back, his men giving the moment space. He helped Gabriella out, steadying her when her legs wobbled. She leaned on him, breath shallow. The bell jingled when he pushed the door open. Luna's head snapped up. For one frozen second, she didn't move. Eyes wide, her mouth open as if afraid the sight would vanish if she blinked. Then she launched herself off the stool. "Mama!" The word cracked the quiet like glass breaking. Luna crossed the store in 3 frantic strides and threw herself into Gabriella's arms. Gabriella dropped to her knees on the linoleum, catching her daughter with a sob that came from deep in her chest. Luna buried her face in her mother's shoulder, small hands clutching the blanket, the familiar lavender scent mixing with hospital antiseptic and river damp. Gabriella rocked her, tears streaming. "Baby, oh my baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left you." Luna shook her head against her mother's neck. "I wasn't alone. Mr. Carlo helped me, just like I knew he would." The words hung in the fluorescent light. Mrs. Mendoza stood in the doorway to the back room, hands clasped, eyes shining. She gave Carlo a small nod, grateful, silent, then slipped away to give them privacy. Carlo stayed in the open doorway, one shoulder against the frame, arms folded. He watched the reunion without moving closer. Mother and daughter clung together on the floor, sobbing in the same rhythm, breaths hitching in unison. Luna's messy ponytail had come half undone, strands stuck to her wet cheeks. Gabriella stroked her back in slow circles, whispering apologies and promises into her hair. Something hot pricked behind Carlo's eyes again. He didn't wipe it away this time. Let it come. After a long minute, Gabriella looked up, still holding Luna tight. "How can I ever thank you?" Carlo stepped inside, boots soft on the worn floor. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill. He knelt in front of Luna, who finally lifted her tear-streaked face. "Payment refunded, kid," he said, voice rough but gentle. He pressed the bill into her small hand. "Job's on the house." Luna stared at the money, then back at him. "But I hired you. That was our deal." Carlo managed a small, cracked smile. "You gave me something worth more than money tonight." "What?" "You reminded me why I built all this." He gestured vaguely toward the night outside, the city he ruled. "Sometimes the scariest man in the city still gets to be the good guy." Luna studied him, eyes searching. "Are you a good guy, Mr. Carlo?" The question landed soft but heavy. Carlo thought of the blood on his hands, the bodies left in containers, the rules he'd broken and the ones he'd kept. He thought of his mother's empty hospital bed, of Luna waiting 3 nights in the dark. Tonight? He said quietly. Yeah, tonight I am. He reached into his coat again, pulled out a plain white card with only a phone number printed in black. No name, no logo. He handed it to Gabriella. If anyone ever threatens you or Luna again, day or night, you call this number. No questions, no payment. You're under my protection now, for life. Gabriella took the card with trembling fingers. Why? Because your daughter walked up to the most dangerous man she knew and asked for help, Carlo said. That kind of courage doesn't come free. Luna tucked the $5 bill into her pocket, then looked up at him one last time. Thank you, Mr. Carlo. He stood. Go home. Hug your mom. Eat something that isn't peanut butter. Gabriella rose slowly, Luna still wrapped around her waist. They walked to the door together. Mrs. And Mendoza pressed a small paper bag of empanadas into Gabriella's free hand. For breakfast, she whispered. Outside, the streetlights cast long, soft pools of gold. Mother and daughter stepped into them hand in hand, Luna's fingers tight in Gabriella's, the $5 bill safe in her pocket. They didn't look back. Carlo watched them until they turned the corner, small figures growing smaller under the glow. Then he stepped into the night, the bell jingling softly behind him. 3 months passed like a slow exhale. Il Sole reopened quietly after the night on the river. No headlines, no police inquiries, just the usual hum of collections and low conversations in the back room. Carlo kept the $5 bill in his breast pocket for weeks before moving it to a small locked box in his office safe. He told himself it was temporary. It wasn't. One Tuesday evening in early winter, Mrs. Mendoza walked in with a plain manila envelope. From Luna, she said simply, placing it on the bar. Carlo waited until the restaurant emptied before opening it. Inside, a single sheet of construction paper. Stick figure family under a lopsided rainbow, pink t-shirt girl holding hands with a smiling woman, a tall man in black beside them. Below, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, Thank you, Mr. Carlo. Love, Luna and Mama. Carlo stared at the drawing until the edges blurred. He took it to his office, pinned it beside the laminated West End map that had tracked every block of his empire for 16 years. The rainbow looked small and bright against the grid of streets. He left it there. The next year, on the anniversary, another envelope arrived, mailed this time. Inside is a fresh $5 bill and a note in the same careful print for the next kid who needs help. Love, Luna, 8 now. Carlo added it to the box without comment. The pattern held. Year after year the envelopes came, sometimes hand-delivered by a taller Luna with braces and a shy smile, sometimes mailed from a new address when Gabriella found better work uptown. The notes stayed the same. The $5 bills accumulated, crisp ones, worn ones, one with a tiny heart drawn in the corner. Carlo never spent them. The locked box grew heavier. Flash forwards came in fragments. At 12, Luna stood outside Il Sole in a school uniform, backpack slung over one shoulder. She handed Carlo the envelope herself. I got an A in English, she said. Mama says it's because I write good thank yous. Carlo nodded, throat tight, and slipped an anonymous envelope into her bag later. College fund seed money, routed through 3 different accounts so it could never trace back. At 17, she came alone, hair long now, pink streak in the front like a quiet rebellion. I'm applying to social work programs, she told him over coffee in the empty restaurant. I want to help kids who feel alone like I did. Carlo listened without interrupting. That year's $5 bill had a post-it note stuck to it, I'm paying it forward. At 22, graduation cap still in her car, she walked in wearing a blazer that almost hid the nerves. I got the job. Caseworker for at-risk youth downtown. She placed the envelope on the bar. This one's special. It's the last one I'll need to send. I can help them myself now. Carlo opened it anyway. Same note, same $5. But he added it to the box, 15 years to the day. The restaurant was quieter now, fewer late-night collections, more families eating pasta in the front room. Carlo, gray threading through his dark hair, sat in the back office under the same desk lamp. The locked box sat open on the desk, 15 $5 bills lined up like soldiers, each with its note preserved. The bell jingled. Luna stepped inside, 22, poised, wearing a simple navy coat and the same determined eyes. No pink t-shirt anymore, but the same quiet courage. She carried no envelope this time. "Mr. Carlo," she said. He stood. "Luna." She crossed the room, stopped at the desk, and looked at the open box. Her breath caught. "You kept them. All of them. Everyone." She traced a finger along the edge of the first bill, the crumpled one from that Tuesday night. I thought maybe you'd spent them, or thrown them away." Carlo shook his head. "They're worth more than money." Luna met his gaze. "I work with kids every day who think no one will help. I tell them my story about the night I walked up to the scariest man in the West End with $5 and hope. Most don't believe me, but I do." Carlo's eyes stung again, familiar now, almost welcome. "You changed things, kid. More than you know." Luna smiled, small and real. "You changed them, too." She reached into her coat, pulled out one last $5 bill, crisp, new, and set it beside the others. No note this time, just the bill. "For the box," she said, "in case there's ever another kid who needs to believe someone will listen." Carlo closed the box gently, turned the key. There will be." They stood in silence a moment longer, the most dangerous man in the West End and the girl who'd once hired him. Luna turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "Thank you, Mr. Carlo, for everything." He nodded. "Take care of them out there." She stepped into the night. Carlo returned to his chair, opened the box one more time, and looked at the row of bills. 15 years of quiet reminders. 15 years of proof that courage didn't need size or strength, just $5 and the willingness to ask. Sometimes the bravest person in the West End was a 7-year-old girl in a pink t-shirt. And sometimes the most dangerous man alive was the one whose eyes still filled with tears when he remembered her.